Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first webinar of the European Coworking Assembly. My name is Željko Crnjaković. I am from Serbia, Subotica. I'm a coworking operator and a member of the ECA. You can also call me Jack if Željko is too hard to pronounce. So I'm very glad to be the host of this first webinar, and hello to everybody who is joining us or everybody who will watch this as a recording. In this webinar, we have a special guest. We have Pauline Roussel from Coworkies. Hello, Pauline.
Hi. Thank you.
How are you?
Very good, thank you. How about yourself?
Very, very good. So as I don't know, I kind of got used to working from home, which is very odd to say from a coworking operator. And I'm not gonna end my co-working career, but like it's scary because my journey into co-working is because I couldn't work from home, and now in the past month I got used to it, so it's like strange feeling. How about yourself?
I think it's the same for me. I was a bit afraid at first, like that working from home would become very repetitive, or like, not being able to actually stop working, because when you're home, I mean, it's endless. But I found a rhythm, so I'm pretty proud of myself for being able to adapt also to the situation. I do miss the social aspect of things. I'm not gonna lie, being surrounded by a lot of people is something I really miss. But through online event like yours, I think it's also a great way to engage in conversations with others. So I think to balance it also for myself, for the last few weeks since the pandemic and the outbreak came in the world, I've tried to attend like various events, experience various virtual co-working communities, which I think we'll talk about later. So I try to remain active just to test things out and see how the whole industry is adapting globally.
Fantastic. And basically, Pauline, you are one of the co-founders of Coworkies, and currently you're based in Bulgaria. And
exactly.
We just talked about this. So between Berlin and Bulgaria. So do you find yourself working remotely in even when the pandemic is not around, or is it just a special situation?
No, actually, we're pretty used to work remotely. I just, what we need is like a computer, a good Wi-Fi, and then, if possible, when we travel, which usually is not difficult to find, a great co-working space to have a good seat and meet other people. But no, I mean, the whole team has always been remote. So, like if I'm traveling, for instance, and my co-founder is not, we are used to travel, like to work together remotely, but also the rest of the team. As I was telling you earlier, we have one designer in Chile. We are writing a book right now, and some of our team, they are in London, but before they were in New Zealand. So we are really used to remote working, actually, which was a challenge at first because I was not used to it. But again, like you adapt to any situation pretty fast, I think.
And you started Coworkies in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, along with Dimitar, your co-founder. And it was envisioned as a global job board targeting co-working spaces and their members. So why? Why did you start Coworkies? This is a kind of a co-working community without a co-working space.
So actually we've been a virtual co-working space since 2016. I mean, I'm just going to try to make the story short because it can be very long, but basically it goes like this. I moved, so in case you couldn't figure out, I'm French, but I moved to Berlin in 2014. My background is more in marketing and communication, and I really needed a change of career. I couldn't take agencies anymore, so I wanted something new. And I saw this ad online, which was called Chief Happiness Officer, when I was looking for a job. And I found it really funny. And when I clicked on it, it was for a co-working space, which I was very unfamiliar with this term in 2014. But I decided to apply just because it kind of reflected who I was. And I got the job, so I became the general manager of a co-working space in Berlin. And what was special about that place is it was that it was targeted at early stage founders only. So there was no freelancer. There was also like no service providers. It was really, really only startup founders, and it was started by business angels. So the whole idea was to help those guys to basically start their businesses. And inside we had a startup accelerator where Dimitar, so my co-founder, was working as entrepreneur in residence. So he was helping the startups basically with like pushing their product forward. And for me, as I was new to it, I had kind of a fresh perspective on things, and I was really interested in the interactions between people. And I was seeing that all the entrepreneurs that were in our space, they were constantly looking to extend their network. They were constantly looking to hire freelancers, to hire interns. They were looking to work with their accountants. But the space as a physical space was limiting them because there was not those people in the space. And for me, as I wanted to add value to them, I felt that we were kind of lacking on that point because we couldn't connect them to anybody because we didn't have those people inside. So with Dimitar, we started to talk if there was a way that we could potentially build bridges between co-working spaces so that people can share work, they can just extend their network, not just in their space, but outside of their space in their city and beyond. And I think that was the first iteration of Coworkies. So it was linked to jobs somehow, but there was also being able to build your co-working network. And to make it, we went to in Berlin because we knew a lot of co-working spaces there. So we went around the city to interview a few of them, very different ones, to kind of get their feedback on such an idea. And this was before WeWork, and this is important. Everybody was really liking the idea of having this connected network with spaces they trust and they know, allowing their members to add more value, etc. But then in 2015, WeWork came to Berlin. And this really hit the market pretty hard because, I'm not going to talk about it, but, their sketchy sales techniques really damaged a lot of communities, including the space I was running. They were able to get through our members, so we lost quite a few teams. And suddenly this idea of openness kind of got less interesting for spaces, so we decided not to push it. And we said, okay, there might be a way for us to still help people find jobs in co-working spaces. And to do that, we decided to start traveling. So just because we wanted to learn about other co-working markets, some where co-working was starting, some where co-working was more developed, like in London, for instance. And we really had this genuine interest in understanding different concepts and understanding different spaces and see how we can build those connections between people. And every time it was always coming down to jobs, the job you do, people they related to the job that other people were doing in other cities or other spaces, or because they were looking for those skills. So I think that's why we always had this interest in jobs. And yeah, we launched a job board 2 to 3 years ago, I think, being one of the first job boards targeted at the co-working industry. And we are really working right now on growing the idea with several angles.
But to be very clear, so the job board isn't just for jobs within the co-working industry. It's for the members of the co-working spaces, like freelancers and businesses that can find themselves or each other within that job board.
Yeah, so actually, at first it was for the co-working industry. We said, co-working spaces are great. A lot of people don't know about co-working. I did it back in 2014. I had no idea. And we thought that, it's actually great to work in a co-working environment because when you work in one company, you see the same people every day. You don't have much opportunity to network. And when you work in a co-working space, suddenly it's many companies, you have loads of events, you can get connected to so many people. And I think when co-working spaces are hiring, this is something they are not highlighting. And for us, it's very important. Even the workspace itself is usually more inspiring than a boring office. So with the job board, our primary idea was to do that. But then what we started to notice through our network and through the people who are using it, it was that members were actually really using the job board as a way to hire people because they were saying look, you can go to this company, but again, you're part of one company. We as a startup, we are part of this great co-working space and look at everything that's happening right now in the space. And suddenly the co-working spaces that worked with us, they understood that for their members, it also makes sense, to use a job board that promotes the workplace. Because for the newer generation, so millennials and all the XYZ generations coming up, workplace matters. Where are you going to work matters more than it was mattering maybe for my mother before. So with Coworkies, we really help them to emphasize that aspect of okay, this is where you're going to work. This is all the opportunities you can create for yourself just because you become part of a co-working community.
And being with Coworkies and working with so many co-working spaces, you visited a lot of spaces. You visited over 400 co-working spaces around the world. So that's
exactly
more than most co-working people have visited.
I think so,
ever, like ever. And so can you tell me what are the most common things that you found in co-working spaces? And what are some of the most unique things that you found? So before we dive into the kind of back.
I think so. Yeah, we've been from Tokyo to New York. So in India, in Thailand, we had the chance to go also like in many countries around Europe. I think the most common thing is like IKEA furnitures. That's maybe something we've seen everywhere across the world, which was interesting. From Japan to New York, you always notice this IKEA shelf or this IKEA chair. But I think this is a question that people often ask us, like, what's so common about all those places that you see? And actually, there's not so much commonalities, you know, like is that if you take the word co-working, like let's say working is the dish, but co is that this uniqueness that everybody works on. And traveling so much, like 412 co-working spaces, we've heard 412 co-working stories. And yes, of course, some of them are doing co-working spaces for parents, but they don't do it the same way. So when we met a co-working space in Berlin that did it, and then a co-working space in Paris, the way of doing it was very different. And somehow, through Coworkies, we were able to connect them. But we also realized that the founder story was so different that actually, and the community they crafted was also very different. So I think we actually at Coworkies, one thing we always say is that, you know, co-working is like this dish that then everybody puts different spices on it. So I'll put more pepper and salt, maybe you'll put some paprika and oregano. So, you know, like the dish that we will serve will not have the exact same taste just because we are different people, and co-working is also a very human business. So it's a lot about the founders. It's a lot about the teams, how they craft the experience, how they craft the concept. And so I think this is what's fascinating about it for me, for Dimitar, for the team, to see that there are so many different concepts and that actually there is very little similarities between all of them.
Fantastic. So before we continue, I just want to address the viewers. So please, if you have any connection problems, if you lose us, if you have a bad connection, just refresh the browser window. You also have a button within the app to click refresh, and that should solve the problem. If not, just refresh the whole page, reconnect, and again, enter the room. So that can also please ask us questions, ask Pauline questions within the chat all through the webinar. Once Pauline and I finish the conversation, I'm going to read the questions and Pauline is going to have a chance to answer them. So let's
Please
get
don't
back.
Be shy.
Yeah. Being connected with so many co-working spaces gives you a unique perspective during this, especially during this crisis, during this pandemic. So can you tell me how co-working spaces around the world are being affected, and what's an overall summary? So is it totally bad?
I mean, again, it's very regional, even like by countries, I would say. Some countries like Spain or France, for instance, had very hard policies of like everything should shut down. Which had, of course, dramatic consequences for co-working spaces, because you cannot open, you cannot operate, you cannot get anything, letters, whatever. You have to be closed. You can go only 1 hour out per day with an authorization, etc. So it's very difficult. But then other countries like Germany, for instance, or even in Berlin, you were not obliged to, by law, you didn't have to close. So some of them remained open, and few members who sometimes, you know, when we were talking at the beginning of the webinar about working from home, I think it's not that easy for everyone, especially when you have kids all day that also are homeschooled. For them, it's a big change. And I think sometimes members, they need that time off and be able to have maybe 1 or 2 hours outside of their home. And that's why in Berlin, most of the people that were using it, they were like parents or people who really needed some time off their apartments. I think in general, yes, everybody has been affected, of course, on various levels, depending on the number of square meters they have, like also the type of communities they had. I'm thinking, for instance, like co-working spaces who had many freelancers have been probably a bit more impacted because this has become very hard for freelancers right now than co-working spaces who had larger companies. I think it's also, like financially speaking, it also came down to how flexible the landlord has been with those co-working spaces. A few of the spaces we spoke to, even today, were telling us that their landlord actually pays their rent, so they don't have to pay rent for now.
Mm-hmm.
And some others said the landlord didn't give us a dime on it, so we still have to pay rent. And the flexibility of the landlord when they are not owning the building, of course, allowed them also to, react for the community. So, for instance, one of the spaces that was telling us the landlord didn't ask us for any rent, then we didn't charge our members. Some of their members actually even decided to pay still just because they wanted to support the space, which was really nice. But I think it really varies. And it's like, like in every situation, it's such a big change. Like we've been used to co-working as a physical space since its inception, since 2005. That was the whole purpose even of co-working. To be like a physical place where people can connect, can collaborate. And we saw it with Coworkies, like as I was saying, since 2016, since our inception, we are also a virtual community. So we are really trying to push community to talk online, and people were not ready for it. And I think this pandemic shifted a little bit the perception of co-working towards people, and they were like, okay, now what do? I have to keep adding value to my members, and how can I do that if I don't have a physical space?
How many co-working spaces? Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you. How many co-working spaces were actually prepared for that change? So to go like more virtual, more to attend to their members instead of just collecting membership?
I think I cannot make generalities because I didn't speak to like the 20,000 co-working spaces around the world. But from those that I've spoke to, I would say maybe 10% of them were able to kind of somehow get because also they had a bigger team, or they were maybe more flexible because they had fundraised, or, of course, every situation is different. But in certain cases, I would say probably 10%, they were a bit more prepared because they had a financial background or something with them that was kind of supporting them, rather than for some spaces where it was, I still remember in January, it was in China, and we were all like, oh yeah, it's in China, it's far away.
It's far away.
Exactly. And we could have, maybe should have prepared and be like, it's coming to Europe, guys. And nobody believed it until it really hit Italy. And then suddenly the house was on fire, and people were like, oh my God, what should we do, And actually for us in January, we were in Japan, and we were starting to really notice people wearing masks and stuff. And we're like, oh, wow, what is this? We are not used to these masks and everything. But yeah, I think, and then of course, when it came to Europe, USA was like, oh, Europe is far away. This is not going to come to US. And then of course it went to US, and I checked the John Hopkins website every day, and I saw how much also countries like Peru are impacted by this virus. So it's really global. And I think everybody told himself it's not going to come here, but it is. And one thing I want to say also is that I see that co-working spaces also relied a lot on their governments. So at least the one I spoke to, they were very much expecting support from the government, be it financial, but also with some certain measures. Even now, I think we're going to talk about it later, when they are building their post-COVID-19 strategies, they are still relying on the government to help them do it.
Yeah.
And I see that some governments, like Germany, have done an amazing job in supporting co-working spaces and smaller businesses. And other countries like mine, France, have done a terrible job to help smaller businesses to thrive and survive. So I think even in the UK, I saw a few conversations that co-working could not, they were in no categories whatsoever to be able to apply for certain grants. Maybe that has changed now, but when I was checking it, it was the case, and I was like, wow, a country like the UK, where even in London, the co-working scene is so big, how come they don't do anything? I just want to point out that for that, I know that Germany has done a really, really good job.
Yeah, it's true. So most co-working spaces are finding themselves in a problem. And
share the link with you after our call if some of the people looking at the webinar right now want to take it, and we want to understand that. what I can tell you also, because we are writing a book where we feature 250 co-working spaces, so we try to really stay close to them. And we know that some of them are going to close down, especially in competitive markets like India, so New Delhi or Mumbai, but also London. The smaller ones, sadly, who don't have, like when the rent is so high and then you cannot operate at all, it's very, very difficult. And of course, on the job side, a lot of the people we know also lost their job, sadly, or at least are on hold for the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the next question. A big problem in co-working spaces is not just being closed, but when we go out of this like emergency, quote unquote, situation, the economic crisis is not over, and the co-working spaces rely on their members. And we saw a number of reports that said that many people lost jobs, as you said. So not only in co-working spaces, but also freelancers, companies, startups, and so on and so forth. So it's really a big question of how many members are going to be able to pay membership fees and be in a need for co-working. So Coworkies being a job board for inter-membership or inter gigs between members, between co-working spaces. So did you see any kind of a spike, like going down or going up in job offers or job demand as a job board?
Yeah, so I mean, most of the clients that we work with right now are putting their hiring plans on hold, which is totally understandable, because I mean, we all know that beside the pandemic, we are probably going to enter an economical crisis. No one really know how big or how dramatic it will be. So I think everybody is trying to be cautious with their finances. So right now, a lot of the hiring plans are on hold, just trying at least to, keep their teams and the one they have. So some of them are part-time at the moment. Some of them have been put on furlough until further notice. So we don't see much hirings going on, but at least trying to protect the team they have. Bigger co-working space, I mean, I guess you also read the news, but like I've seen, for instance, in New York, co-working spaces like The Wing, they've fired like most of their employees, which is like more than 200 people. So imagine suddenly like are becoming available on the job market. And actually gigs that you just mentioned is a feature that we created during coronavirus, Coworkies. And if you have something that you are looking for, you can also say it on Coworkies. So, and talking to a lot of co-working spaces, they also realize that members they need other people to work with. So gigs actually was born out of this, of like, okay, let's support members to find each other and kind of like hire each other more on like a project basis. So it's not about a full-time contract or a part-time contract, but it's really more like on demand. And this is interesting because I think it's getting more interest from people. Of course, at the moment, there are a lot of people looking for jobs. So yeah, that's a way we found to support the industry, but also co-working members. And we also had co-working spaces writing us emails of like people they sadly had to lay off, just in case we hear about other jobs becoming available in their cities. So we are also trying to keep track of those things so that we can help them find a job whenever we see something becoming available.
So still talking about the gigs on Coworkies. So are the gigs open to anyone, or do you need to be like a member of a registered co-working space or something like that?
It's open to anybody. Like some people might not work from a co-working space right now, but they still can find a job. I think for us, the co-working element was like important because we know that a lot of the co-working members right now need work and look for work, but there can also be other people, of course, like it's not restricted. The idea is just to bring more opportunities.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, moving from these dark matters, there is one topic that I wanted to discuss with you because I saw it on Coworkies, and I saw it that you interviewed one of my really, really kind of top tier goals that
Oh,
people I
really?
want to meet, Seth Godin. And you talked about virtual co-working. So
Yeah.
what is virtual co-working? It's like a concept. It's been out there, but I first heard of it right now. I kind of read the text, and then I had to reread the text a couple of times. So can you explain the
Yeah,
concept of
sure.
virtual?
So, as I was telling you, I tried to remain active over those last 3 weeks, experiencing with different communities online. And one of the emailing I got was actually from Akimbo, which is one of the companies that Seth Godin runs and manages. And they were announcing inside that they were launching a virtual co-working space, which was called Akimbo Co-working, and that it would be just a 1-month project. And just because it had the word co-working in it, I was like, wow, if Seth Godin, which I also really, really like, I was like, okay, if he's launching a virtual co-working, I have to jump on board because it was absolutely free for anyone to join. And I just wanted to see what people are making out of it, because if someone like him is promoting this term of like co-working, I just wanted to see how he does it. And I was genuinely interested in it. And aside from him, I also was invited by a Japanese co-working space community to try one of their virtual co-working. So basically the Kansai region in Japan, so it's like Osaka, Kyoto, and Kobe, they got together and they created a virtual co-working space, which they use the platform. I talk about it in the article, where they have different rooms and members can meet each other and everything. And I've tried those too. And actually, what was interesting is like, people used the virtual co-working elements not necessarily to learn or to attend events, because there's so many of them available, like those webinars and everything. But actually, like on the Seth Godin Akimbo co-working, what was really interesting is that the question that they were asking you when you join was like, what's your favorite book? And then they had a thread in the virtual co-working where everybody shared their books, their favorite books. And this was such a conversation spark. So people were able to discuss from their favorite book. People were connecting because they liked the same book and they were like, oh yeah, and I like this and that. And then suddenly it became, I saw that people were talking about video games or board games. And of course, there were also like professional topics. So some people were like, oh, are they anyone who is a web developer? Because I'm having a problem right now. Can someone help me? And so in the Akimbo co-working, I think the balance was that there was a chat that was, of course, constantly available. And then there were some moderators that were launching Zooms during the day, and you could join basically 24/7. And when the moderators were not here, the Zoom room was still open, and people could just join. So if you were from, I don't know, like Australia, and the team from Akimbo is based in US, you could still join and talk with people who are in the same room as you. And for the Japanese one, it was the same. Like people from, I joined it, there was an English-speaking room that I got placed into, and inside I got a chance to speak with people from Singapore who also find out about this co-working space and other regions of Japan. And it was really interesting because also, just one last thing, there was also there was a room where it was a silent room. So you can join this room, but you cannot talk. So we just watch each other. We have the camera, so we feel that we are not alone, but we cannot talk to each other. If we want to talk, we need to go to another room. So it's kind of like recreating the physical environment, but digitally, which was really interesting.
But the point of, like, when you explain it, so the point of virtual co-working is to fill those like social moments of co-working. So not, at first reading the article was when Seth was like explaining the morning focus and the evening wind down and stuff like that. So like, it's not about joining a room and, okay, you're here, now let's work. Just be online, be with me, Pauline, like while I work. So, but then to basically chit chat in those breaks. So it's like a big Slack group and whatever you have within that. So, but just moderated. So that's
cool.
I
think the thing that made it valuable for people was that, you work from home right now. So your home, your flat, wherever you are. And what you miss and what you really miss out of the co-working is the social element. And because right now you might see your wife, your husband, or your kids all day, but you don't see your colleagues, you cannot meet new people because you're locked down and you cannot go to bars, you cannot go out. So I think through the virtual co-working, suddenly you got access to that still. And what's interesting is that, like it's been 3 to 4 weeks that we are all somehow locked in various ways. And when I talk to community managers or to people running co-working communities online, they start to notice that people get tired of heavy content events. So right now, if they do too many webinars, the attendance is really low. What people want, they want wine drinking events, or they want to play Pictionary together. They want to have some fun, not just work, because they have it so much. So it's interesting to see also that online, there are some like transitions. At the beginning, everything was like, oh, I have to get myself together. Let's do yoga together. And then, oh, I have to become smarter or get myself educated. Let's talk webinars. But now people are like, okay, guys, let's chill a little bit. Let's do Pictionary. Let's drink wine. So it's interesting to see that even virtually, things are moving in different ways every week.
I saw that one comment that everybody said, so among these all webinars and events and interviews and whatever, whoever comes up with an after party application is going to make a fortune. so like,
I think so, yeah.
We need an after party
app. think so. Yeah.
Okay. So was the concept of virtual co-working like spread, did it come alive apart from the Akimbo co-working and the co-working? So how often did you see it? So did many people adopt it? A lot?
Yeah, I think everybody, because, again, it all comes down to the value you provide and the value you add to your community. And as we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, up until now, everything has been done with the physical space, through physical events, through physical community connections and everything. And suddenly when this came, you lose the physical connection to your members, and whatever's left is your Facebook group, your Slack group, or whichever WhatsApp group you're using. And so the purpose is like, how do I keep adding value to my members? How do I support them while being online? And of course, virtual co-working or online community management was the solution. So I think, and then what was interesting is that every co-working space did it differently again, because again, it's a human business and you have members that might not have the same needs as members from other people here from this group. So I heard from a lot of co-working spaces that a lot of them reached out to every single member they had to understand what they need help with, so that they can craft their virtual co-working strategy alongside what people really wanted. So that was interesting for me.
Yeah. So, and can you monetize virtual co-working? Did you see any models of that?
So like the Japanese co-working spaces I was telling you about that got together to monetize it. I talked to him again today because I knew we were having the webinar, so I wanted a few updates. At first, when they tried it, they were on a 2 weeks free plan with the tool they were using. And then now they continued it. And the cost of this tool is $950 a month. So they spread it across different co-working spaces. But he was saying that they also opened a donation box with a $50 type of membership. And members starting to give $50 because they got value out of it for the 3 weeks they've been using it. But also, I think a lot of co-working spaces start to realize that they can have a virtual membership in their current membership plans. Because, there's also a thing like, up until now, everything has been done physically, and now they started to do things digitally, and then you go back to the physical space, but you're not going to remove the digital thing, because otherwise everything you will have done up until now will be kind of like lost work. So I think now people are asking themselves, like, where's the balance? How can I keep adding value, and where should I put the needle to find the right balance between virtual activities I'm running and physical activities? And I think it's important to consider because also, maybe we're going to talk about it in a second, but, it's not like, I don't know, you said, I think that in Serbia, you are allowed to go back to the office next week, but probably not every members you have will come back right away.
Exactly.
There is at the moment, I actually listened to a very interesting webinar from WeWork, China, last week that they did with a interior designer and a real estate company. And they were saying that right now what they sense in China is that there is a very big lack of trust from the members towards office buildings in general, so co-working spaces included. So I think this whole sense of trust needs to be rebuilt. And so you cannot expect all your members to come back tomorrow, nor can you expect to go back to regular community events tomorrow. So I think that's why virtual is still important. And on Coworkies, we actually even have the option now to create your own virtual co-working, which is pretty cool, where you can invite all your community into one place and maybe connect it with other communities. So that's also an interesting part, because like suddenly when you're online, you become part of an extended network, right?
What a fantastic option. So I believe that basically, as you said, people being not trusting the businesses and office buildings, it's going to come down to each kind of culture, because Chinese have one culture, Europeans have another, and even in Europe you have a multitude of different cultures, and the US is a totally different story, or any other part of the world. So it's all come down to, we cannot copy the Chinese model. We cannot copy the American model. We need to kind of find middle ground and what works for our place. So within all the situation and what you notice and what you learn, so what can co-working spaces, but also co-workers do better in the future? So do we have any suggestions for them?
I mean, I think right now what's important as a co-working space is to think about this, what's going to be your post-COVID strategy when you reopen. Because wherever you are in the world, like this pandemic and the fact that everybody got locked down created somehow some fear towards people. I see it here in Bulgaria. I know in France through my family that there is even your friends, you're kind of like questioning where they've been, etc. So I think it's important for co-working spaces to really work on like a clear communication plan. How are you going to frame it? How are you going to explain to members why is your space safe? And not just say that it's safe, like show, don't just tell, like show why and how it's safe. And yeah, I think there's going to be so much impact, like I think for the upcoming month, probably co-working spaces will have to rethink their layout. Certain, like how do you make sure that tables are like spread even at least 1.5 meters away from each other, all those like safety and cleanliness policies that you have to reinforce. Today I was on a call with other co-working operators, and it was interesting to see that they're like, okay, should we allow visitors? Not. We are not going to use our event space for quite some time, so let's just use it as an extended co-working space. What do we do with the meeting rooms? Because we don't want people to be in such small spaces all together. So what are the solutions? So I think,
you use them as Skype rooms or just for single purposes. Yeah, exactly. But exactly. So and what we talked about. So with all of the necessary suggestions that people need to create and solutions that you need to create, you have an event coming up at the end of May, and we can promote it right now. So can you talk to us about your? Can we call it a hackathon, or is it an ideathon?
The general idea is to be a hackathon, but it's not. I know that it can sound scary because of the techie terms. So yeah, we can say it's a combination of hackathon and ideathon. And basically, so last year, after traveling so much around the world, we've also noticed that the co-working industry is going through a lot of challenges beside the pandemic. And we thought that one of the best ways to talk about them was not to create another conference, because there are so many great ones, Co-working Spain, Co-working Europe, Juicy, wherever you want to go in the world, there are great co-working conferences happening. But we thought that through a hackathon, we could maybe make a difference and bring people, especially members, to build the future of co-working and workspaces the way they imagined it through various tracks. So like well-being in the workplace, interior design, community building, etc. And this year we had the plan to make it in a few cities around the world, but of course with the pandemic we cannot do it. So we said, okay, there's no reason for us not to make it happen. Let's do it anyway. So we decided to twist it a little bit this time and to open it up to co-working spaces and their members. So we are planning to do a 3-day event, which is not going to be 3 days of full hacking, but it's more a program where people will be able to listen to interesting speakers, but also have very engaging conversations with their members about what the future of co-working, of their co-working space should look like, so that everybody feeling like, again, safe and trust the space to go back there. So we are preparing a program to help them think this way and co-create together. And we also have great prizes that people will be able to win. So cash prizes, great coffee, cool accessories that can be beneficial for the co-working space and their communities. So yeah, we are really trying to put an event together where people can engage in meaningful conversations, not just with their members, but also with other co-working spaces from various regions of the world.
And it's all virtual.
Yes, all online. So, I mean, I would have loved to do it physically, but it's not possible. So as everybody, we adapt. So yeah, it's going to be all online.
So basically, for everybody, and you explained it quite a bit, I'm going to just compress it. So
please,
if you have a co-working space and you want to enjoy an idea building exercise on how to come out of this economic crisis and pandemic better for your members, join the event that Pauline is organizing, and she's going to tell us how we can get to it. And basically, in 3 days, brainstorm and come up with ideas and have a chance to win some prizes. But I got an idea to enroll myself, so also and my community.
Yes.
So she has already sold me on that. So for everybody out there, I dare you to join me. So when and how can we find out about the event as far as the viewers are concerned?
Yeah, so I shared the link with you of the website, which is going to be pushed tomorrow on the weekend or on Monday, together with the Eventbrite. From there, everybody can get their tickets for the event, and it's going to happen at the end of the month. Everything will be written on the Eventbrite and on the website that we are creating for it. Cool. The name of the event is Hack Coworking, hackcoworking.com. And from there, you will be able to have like all the information about the program, the speakers, etc.
So hackcoworking.com, and by the time this replay and recording is published on the ECA website, we can also push the link because it's going to be by after Monday. So and
I should just mention that it's open to everyone, so you can join as a team. But if you also don't have a team and if you're just by yourself, you can also join. And through the event, we'll be able to connect you with other people if you want to form a team. So it's really open to anybody, co-working spaces, their members, but also people genuinely interested in the topic.
Fantastic. So before we finish up, so please let us know if you have any questions. We're here for a couple of more minutes. So while people decide if they have questions for you, Pauline, I'm going to ask you one final question. So what's next for you? What's next for Coworkies? What's the plan look like for the end of 2020 and 2021?
The book, definitely a big
What kind
thing.
of a book? We didn't talk about a book.
Yes, so as I said, and as we discussed, we've been around the world. We visited 412 co-working spaces. So, and a lot of people we met along the way were like, oh, you should write a book about it. And at first we really laughed at the idea. We were like, yeah, okay, it's not our job. We don't know how to do that. But the more we heard it, I think we got really seduced by the idea. So we decided to make it happen. The book is going to be called Around the World in 250 Co-working Spaces. It's going to be a collection of co-working stories from all over the world, from co-working founders to co-working community managers to co-working members, sharing their love for co-working, how they started, how they grew, very, very different angles. We also have great partners that are supporting the project. So we will be able to have emphasizes on accessibility in the workplace, interior design in the workplace. So it's basically, we like to say it's a collection of stories, and it's things you can't find on Google because it's not about the marketing message, but it's really about the stories of what pushed people to open those spaces.
Well, we're looking forward to that book. Pauline, thank you so much for being my
Thank you for
guest
having
on
me.
this webinar. To everybody out there, please join us in the next webinar when we have one, and we'll definitely have one soon. Check out the coworkingassembly.eu website, subscribe to our newsletter. Check out our podcast. Coworking Values is another content show that we produce, and also check out the page coworkingassembly.eu, because we have a kind of a list of online events, and every event that is happening within coworking. We have a lot coming up. We have the Coworking Symposium, we have the European Freelancer Week in October, and a lot of different events that we're going to do and promote. So be with us, check with us, and let us know what you like and what you don't like. In that sense, I'm going to finish up and say good night to you all. Pauline, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.